Come on!
How's it going, everybody? You're watching the Broken Controller Club. My name is Ed and I'm your host. I recently did a poll on my channel to find out if you, yes, you, prefer reviews and looks back at older games or prefer when I play through new releases, and the votes overwhelmingly pointed towards older games. So, with that in mind, I thought I'd follow up my Pac-Man review from earlier this month with a review of the Atari Flashback Collection Volume 1 on the PlayStation. And just like I did with my Capcom Arcade Stadium review, I'm going to go through each of these titles over multiple videos. Now, despite being born in the early 80s, I was never an Atari guy. My first console was a ColecoVision, and Atari was more of a Gen X console to me. That's not to say that there weren't good games on it, and I did find some gems in this collection that I didn't know about. I also found some turds that I don't really ever want to play again. So the presentation of this collection is actually really impressive. You can see what the original arcade cabinets and cartridge boxes looked like, along with user manuals that show not only how to play the games, but also the once archaic way you'd have to hook up these super old consoles. Like, remember when the RF adapter was common for hooking up your console and composite cables were actually considered fancy? Anyway, just like in the arcades, you can enter your high scores here as well and compare how you did with other people in the leaderboards. You can also mess with the options before starting the game to change the display, the controls, and also things like your difficulty level, starting lives, and when you get bonus lives. So now that that's out of the way, let's get on to the games. There's a ton to unpack here, and for today's video, I'm reviewing the arcade games, then the next parts after that are going to be all the cartridge games. Before we get this party started though, do me a solid and subscribe so you'll get alerted to the upcoming videos in the series, along with other reviews and playthroughs. Black Widow is a twin-stick shooter where you play, not as a murderous spouse or a dead Avenger with a really shitty standalone movie, but as an actual spider. You shoot what I can only describe as ninja stars at flies and other bugs on the screen, and as you progress, parts of the web prevent you from moving around, and you'll fight new enemies like these fly things that blow up when you shoot them. For such an old game, I actually really enjoyed playing this. There's bonus rounds where these lines of bugs fly at you that reminded me a lot of Galaga 2. The graphics are obviously really simple, but they're really colorful. Lunar Lander is next on the list. I hated this game. It's like if someone figured out how to make it frustrating to watch paint dry. You have to use your thruster to direct this little ship that looks like it's something out of South Park down onto the ground, and the terrain is kind of jagged and messed up. You have to basically reduce the speed of this ship to almost zero in order to not have it shatter and be told you created a crater or that there were no survivors on board. You only have so much fuel to do it as well, so running out of fuel means that you're going to drift in space for a while, and watching that happen was actually a lot more depressing than I thought it would be. Anyway, this game. On to the next one. I had a hard time getting Space Duel to work at first. It plays a lot like Asteroids, where you can rotate your ship in any direction, and you'll use your thruster button to move it around, and most of the objects in the game break into smaller pieces. Sometimes there's this little jerk ship that shoots back at you. I guess that's why it's called Space Duel to begin with. The first couple times I tried playing it, my ship wasn't there, and instead was this weird mutant retard version of the ship that was like all scribbled around and looked like someone with brain damage tried drawing what they thought the ship was supposed to look like and gave it a wanking claw to shoot from. You can play 1 or 2 player games in this, and in a weird twist, you can control 2 ships at a time in one of the versions of single player. That was confusing and not fun. Regular single player wasn't bad though if you like Asteroids. Centipede is a classic. If you're my age, you likely remember playing it with a trackball in the arcades, and that's really the best way to do it. It controls fine on the gamepad too, but it's not the original way to enjoy the game. You play as this, I guess he's a midget with a wand or something. That's what the cover art looks like. We're gonna call him Willow. And Willow's gotta kill the centipede as it comes down the level. The mushrooms block his way, and whenever you blast a part of the centipede, it splits and keeps going. This is unlike a real centipede that you can cut in half and it'll die after being in agonizing pain. There's also this crackhead spider that jumps around the screen, and there's a better chance of you dying from him than the actual centipede getting you. This game's hard, but it's a really fun time. Millipede is basically a slightly upgraded version of Centipede. Your midget has a bow this time around instead of a little janky wand, and the Millipede comes down just like before. This version has updated graphics, so the mushrooms look more like actual mushrooms, and there's a bunch of added enemies to this one like earwigs and beetles. You're also able to see the area that you can move around in, and that changes as you play. Lastly, you can shoot canisters of DDT to kill the bugs. I really liked shooting these because unlike real life, using it in the game didn't get some environmentalist whack job freaking out and getting it banned for your next playthrough. It felt rebellious to use. Tempest is another classic. It's a lot of fun, and the visuals are still fun to watch to this day, mainly because of the crazy shapes each level takes on. That said, I didn't really like playing this with a gamepad as the controls didn't feel as intuitive as they did in the arcade. If I remember correctly, it was like a little wheel that you controlled everything with back then. Basically, to get through each level, you have to shoot each of the red-looking shapes that move from the very center of the screen toward you. The red dots off in the distance give you an idea of where they're going to come from, which is really helpful because once they start creeping their way forward, you don't have a lot of time before they share the same plane as the one that you're on, and then they're going to start chasing you around. I was actually piss poor at this game, as you can see, but despite that and the gamepad controls, I still really like it. Atari Force Liberator is a game that plays a lot like Missile Command, but with a rotating planet that makes the game feel like it's in 3D. The gameplay is simple, but I still like the presentation a lot. You have 4 ships, one at each corner of the screen, and there's a target reticle that you'll use to shoot enemy missiles, ships, and bases. Each time one of your ships blows up, the game becomes that much harder because you're basically losing a fourth of your firepower with each hit. This one was really fun. Also, with the speed that these planets rotate, that means that either each battle is really slow or time passes like super fast in this. See? Who says I can't think about deep sometimes? It's Pong. I don't really know what to say. Controlling this on a gamepad instead of a paddle kinda sucks though. It's way too sensitive as my awful playing that you're currently watching is about 60% controls and 40% me. I had to drop the sensitivity to make it playable, and even then it's really way too sensitive. It doesn't really get simpler than Pong, and it basically started all of video games in general, which means that technically you can blame Pong for Fortnite. I mean, shouldn't something be blamed for that? And the last game for today is Warlords. This is basically 4-player Pong where you and 3 other competitors are paddling this fireball toward your opponents to break down their walls little by little and eventually hit the center to knock them out. Like Pong, I had to drop the sensitivity in this to make it easier to control, but for some weird reason that limited the range that my paddle could move with the analog stick, so I had to use the directional pad instead, and then it was fine. This is kind of boring in single player, but get 3 of your friends to play this with you and it could be really fun and crazy. Also, unlike Pong, you can catch the fireball and launch it in the direction you want. So that's all for today's arcade games on the collection. I'll be back with part 2 here shortly, where we're going to check out games like bowling, a horrible car racing game, and some game where you use a seesaw to catapult someone face first into a ceiling to break some bricks. See you next time. Congratulations! You're one of an elite few to make it to the end of the video. Reward yourself by hitting the round subscribe button in the middle, and then check out the other goodies I've got in the links next to it.